Chapter 7, Section 2 wants you to graph inequalities, and I want you to graph them without a calculator. When you are looking at your equations and you have the equation in standard form, standard form means that the x and the y are on the same side. Instead of solving for y like your Algebra 1 teacher wants you to, and then plugging it into a calculator, my question is, why don't you just do it by hand, get it done, and move on? To graph a line, you really only need 2 points. The third point we call a checkpoint. When you are in this level of mathematics, we're just going to use the x and the y-intercept. When you substitute a 0 in for the x and go to the equation, 0 plus y equals 2, then y equals 2 is going to be the point that is on the y-axis, and it's our boundary point, if you will. Plug a 0 in for the y value. X plus 0 equals 2, so x is 2, is going to be our x-intercept. The number that has the variable is going to be that intercept. So the x-intercept is 2, 0. The y-intercept is the point 0, 2. If you are watching this and you're in my class, you have to label points. Label those 2 points. Now, some key things that you need to know about inequalities. This is the less than symbol. There is no equals to line under it. Therefore, we connect our points with a dashed or a dotted line. And you are to use a straight edge. Your school ID will work. You don't have to have a ruler necessarily. The next thing that we're going to do is we have to have a checkpoint. My checkpoint that is a go-to point is 0, 0, the origin. If the line goes through the origin, then we have to pick another point. But the 0, 0, I'm going to substitute in the 0 for the x and the 0 for the y in my inequality and check to see, is this true? Is 0 less than 2? If it is true, I'm going to shade on the side that my point is. If it is false, I'm going to shade on the other side. X minus 2y is greater than 4. I'm going to draw my x and my y. Again, I'm going to use the x-intercept and the y-intercept. And to use the x-intercept, I'm going to substitute in a 0 for the y. I said y, wrote y instead of a 4. X-intercept, I substitute the 0 in. X is greater than 4, so my point 1, 2, 3, 4, 0 is on the x-axis. I'm going to substitute a 0 for the x, and that is going to be for my y-intercept. I'm going to divide by the negative 2. And remember, when you're multiplying or dividing by a negative, you flip the sign. Y is a negative 2, 0, negative 2. Now, in this particular problem, I have no line. Again, I'm going to connect it with a dotted or a dashed line, putting arrows at the end of my line, showing that those go infinitely forever. My checkpoint is my go-to point, 0, 0. 0 minus 2 times 0 is greater than 4. Is 0 greater than 4? Well, no, that's false. Here's my checkpoint, 0, 0. I substituted it into my inequality, and I showed that it was false. I'm going to shade the opposite side. You shade the true side. So if I plug in my checkpoint and it's false, I shade the other side. 6 is greater than or equal to 3x plus 2y. Again, this is in standard form. I'm going to use my y-intercept and my x-intercepts. I'm going to substitute the values into the equation. And if you are in my class, I want you to use graph paper, not regular lined paper. I want you to use your graph paper. If I substitute the 0 into the equation and solve for y, what value of y times 2 is going to be 6? Well, 6 divided by 2 is 3. 0, 3 is my y-intercept. It's on my y-axis. If I substitute the value, 6 is greater than or equal to 3x plus 2 times 0. 6 is greater than or equal to 3x. I'm going to divide by the 3. 6 divided by 3 is 2. 2, 0 is my point. Now, on this one, guys, I want to show you something. I've heard a lot of my students say, oh, if it's greater than, you just shade above. If it's less than, you just shade below the line. And that is not necessarily true. I have a line underneath it. This time it's going to be a solid. That means it's or equal to. That means it could be on the line to be a solution. And this would typically mean that I would shade above if that were the case, but that's not always the case. So I'm going to go back to my checkpoint 0, 0. 6 is greater than or equal to 3 times 0 plus 2 times 0. 6 is greater than or equal to 0. Well, that's a true statement. 6 is greater than 0. My point 0, 0 lies below the line. So don't go into your little trick from middle school that said, oh, if it's greater than, shade above, and if it's less than, shade below. In the upper level maths, you really need to check to make sure that you have the correct side shaded. All right, so some key points that we need to look at. Key points to the shading of inequalities. If it's in standard form, your ax plus by equals c, use the x and y intercepts. Do not solve for y and then use a calculator. Just plug in your 0 for the x, solve for the y, plug in the 0 for the y, solve for the x. Another key points from this lesson. If you have less than or greater than, you should connect the points with a dotted line. If you have a less than or equal to or greater than or equal to, then connect your points with a solid line. And with that, you now know how to solve, or graph rather, the inequalities